Hello, and welcome to a really special and exciting edition of our Lockdown Stories. This is a series of short videos in which I'm interviewing some of our members of Kingston Liberal Synagogue about their life as a KLS member and also about their experience in lockdown over the last few months. And the reason that this is such a special series is that I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Joyce today. Now, Joyce is a founder member of Kingston Liberal Synagogue, so she has been there right from the start, and I'm really looking forward to hearing more about that. So, Joyce, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for asking me.
And I'd like to start off by if you could tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about your background as a KLS member.
Well, I was a member of LJS for many years, and when I got married and came to live in Kingston, I went on being a member of LJS, but it was difficult to get to LJS, particularly after I had my first child. And when I was expecting my second child, Daniel, a group of people in Surbiton were starting to think about founding a synagogue locally. So in fact, I didn't have a great deal to do with the talking around that because I first of all was expecting and then had a very small baby. We'd also just moved from a rented flat to a house of our own, and there was a good deal to do with that. So I don't remember a great deal about the very early days of the synagogue. And of course, there was no building in those days. We moved around, and then after a while, the Quakers, the Friends, let us have a room in their church, and that's where we stayed until we got the synagogue building.
And what year was it you got the synagogue building? Can you remind me?
Oh, wait a minute. No, well, we had the 40th. I can't remember which year it was that the synagogue was actually bought, but we must have been about 10 years, I would think, that we went on going to the Quakers. Initially, it was all rather cramped, but then when we became a sort of fixture, they gave us a cupboard because we had a portable ark.
Yes.
It all had to be set up at the Quakers each Sabbath, or holiday. So it was really rather a business. And Pam and Norman Fletcher-Jones, Norman had made the ark, and he and Pam used to have to set it up. But once we got our own building, of course, it made life much, much easier.
Of course, absolutely. And just for those who are watching who may not know, Kingston Liberal Synagogue I think it's 53 years old now. We celebrated our 50th birthday.
We had 50th, yes, and we had a 40th celebration as well.
Fantastic. And you've been there ever since. That's just
off and on. Yeah.
Absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. Let's talk about the more recent situation then, Joyce. So obviously over the last few months, we've all been in lockdown. What has your situation been like? What's that been like for you?
Well, really very easy. I'm one of those people who has been shielded, but I have a large, rather untidy garden, and I still haven't finished tidying it up. So there's always been plenty for me to do, and my house is very cool. In fact, it's like an igloo in the winter, but in the summer it is cool and quite spacious, so it really hasn't been very difficult. My son has been shopping once a week for me and bringing my shopping and then coming and sitting socially distant in the garden. And all sorts of careless people have very kindly come to visit me. I have a side entrance, so you don't have to come into the house to come to my garden, which makes it much easier for people, so they don't have to worry. And quite honestly, it hasn't been terribly different from August, which can be quite secluded for me anyway, because I'm not, from health reasons, able to go abroad anymore, ready to go away on holiday. So nothing much ever happens in August, really. The difference is usually the library's open and I can do my own shopping. But I've had compared with people whom it must be terrible, shut up in a flat with perhaps 2 or 3 children, a hot flat. It's really been very easy for me.
That has been such a common thing that has been coming through from these interviews, that a lot of people are very, very thankful for the fact that they do have their own houses and their own gardens. Yeah, absolutely. And that we're all very conscious that other people are not so fortunate, and it must have been much more difficult.
I've also been inundated with offers of help from all sorts of people, the synagogue, local people, friends, and it really hasn't been difficult for me at all. I'm very sorry for some people for whom it must have been a nightmare. And I think it's going to go on too. I don't see this ending very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad to hear that you've been fine anyway, Joyce, but I absolutely share your concerns about, people who aren't as fortunate as some of us. What has your involvement with the KLS community been like during this time?
I've had visits from Jill and Norman have been remarkable, but they always take enormous care of me anyway, lockdown or no. And I've had visits from several people who live nearby and offers of help and offers to do my shopping. And I've been plugged in. Not online, but I've been plugged in by Sarah Olson for book club. There's a special way you can that I can be heard on the telephone, and that's been helpful. And Stephanie Orkney did that for a special service too. But for ordinary Friday services, I have a peculiar system whereby I telephone Jill and Norman, and they put their telephone near their screen, and I listen to the service over the telephone. And that works out pretty well, providing Rennie remembers to tell what page we're on. And if he does, I can follow really pretty well most of the time.
That's wonderful. That's fantastic. And what has that involvement meant to you, Joyce?
What with the synagogue? Well, the synagogue is a very important part of my life. Normally a weekend is mostly Friday evening. I try to go to synagogue, want to go to synagogue either Friday evening or Saturday morning, sometimes both. And of course, a lot of other interesting things happen. And they're not happening, but because so many people have been so kind about coming in, I haven't felt cut off at all. And Rennie also has telephoned 2 or 3 times, which is extremely kind because he must be very busy, offered help, offered to do my shopping. So everybody has been extraordinarily kind.
And the other thing that I remember very well is when we were celebrating VE Day, when we had the special Shabbat service for VE Day online, and you actually joined by telephone and you were able to talk to us all about your experiences.
That was a more complicated way of telephoning. For the normal Friday service, I don't join in, I just listen. But there is this complicated way that Sarah and Stephanie both know about, where I have a special number which I have to put into my telephone. And then I can hear people and people can hear me as well. So that's what happened. Craig did that for the VE Day service.
Yeah, and that was absolutely fascinating. That was a really special moment for us all to actually hear your experiences of actually living through that really, important moment.
Yes, there's something I don't think I did mention, which if I mentioned it then I apologize for repeating it. One of my most vivid, warm memories is being taken out by my mother into our garden and told to listen because they were going to ring the church bells for El Alamein, because in the war the church bells were never rung. That would have been the invasion signal. And the only time they were rung was to celebrate the victory at 11 o'clock on the Sunday morning after El Alamein. And she said, I want you to remember this, and I have.
Wow, that's amazing. What an amazing story. Gosh. Just moving on a little bit, Joyce, can you tell us, do you think that your relationship with your Judaism has changed at all over the last few months of lockdown?
No, I can't say it has really. I mean, one knows awful things happen and in the world, and you, with any luck, it's not as bad as people fear. But I mean, post-Holocaust, one knows there are disasters of all kinds. This is a very different kind of disaster. But one only has to look at what's happening in Lebanon. I mean, more now in Beirut, there are more immediate catastrophes. And this one is different, I think, a bit because, well, a bit like the war, you don't know how it's going to end. Very often with a very unpleasant situation, you know that one day in the foreseeable future it'll be over. With this, we just don't know. And I'm very, very sorry for young people whose lives are terribly disrupted, and for people who are would be going to university, people who are at university. I have a grandson at university who is now going to do all his work online, and that's not what university is about.
No. Okay, and do you think there's anything that you've learnt in the last few months of lockdown?
I think there's become, in my road, has become a very noticeable community spirit in the road, which actually was occasionally apparent before. Sometimes there were street parties for things like the Queen's Diamond Jubilee and that kind of thing. But now there are many, many people on whom I know I could call if I needed to. And that's very pleasant. My next door neighbors, who are extremely kind anyway, the husband of mine is an Orthodox Jew, and the wife is a Danish Christian. They're a delightful couple. But she bakes a challah every Friday. And since lockdown, she's been bringing me a challah every Friday. So that's very nice. And so I got my challah on Friday night. Actually, they're on holiday now. But no, I think the neighborliness on the road has been very pleasant.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people have experienced something similar, and it's hopefully one of the positive things that has come out of this difficult situation, you know, that people are sort of valuing their local communities more, and hopefully that's something that will continue.
Well, I think it will, because I don't think this is going to be over very quickly.
No. And I guess at KLS we're very fortunate because we have a good community and we know the value of that community anyway. But for other people who maybe aren't members of communities in the same sense, if they've had that, you know, same experience in terms of becoming closer to their neighbours, their immediate neighbours and their streets, just like you're talking about.
And I think some people probably in country areas must be very isolated. It must be very difficult for them. But living in Surbiton here, it hasn't been difficult for me. I've been very fortunate.
Do you know what? That is it's such great news to hear that you've been okay for the last few months, Joyce, and that, you know, we've all been looking out for you. And like I say, it's been brilliant to hear you on the services a few times that you've contributed, and we know that you're there even when you're not.
Even when I can't speak.
Yeah, that's right. Norman and Jill always say, you know, Joyce is here with us, so we always know you're there.
Yes, I enjoy hearing your music too. And René has been remarkable, carrying up so much of the service himself, which must be quite exhausting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a very, very special and interesting time. Joyce, can I just say a huge thank you for agreeing to be interviewed for this series? Because like I say, as a founder member of our community, you really have a very special guest.
I should say there are still two other founder members, Brenda Dombey and Tony Spivak, so I'm not the only one.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Well, thank you very much, Joyce. And stay tuned for those of you who are watching, because we'll have some more interviews to come. Thank you again, Joyce, and see you all soon.
Thank you for asking me. Goodbye.